So typically primaries work a certain way in terms of the order. You've got your Iowas, you've got your New Hampshires, you've basically got a couple of states that almost always, or basically always going back decades and decades, get to go first and get to largely influence who ends up being a candidate for the Democrats or the Republicans. Well, we're now in a time of potential shifting. Maybe it won't look that way next time around. And if Nevada Democrats have anything to say about it, it won't. On Monday, they passed a bill that aims to make that state the first to weigh in on the 2024 presidential primary contest. It still needs to be signed into law, and the national parties would need to accept it. So this is not a done deal, and there are some who are not happy with this, like those states that always get to go first and get to have 1 billion visits from every presidential candidate. New Hampshire is making the case of the DNC that they should get to be among the first there. And so I wanted to have this conversation specifically with you, Jessica, because I know that you worked with the Bernie campaign. And it's not like Bernie didn't do well in those early races, but it does shape the race. What do you think about this?
Yeah, the folks in Iowa are gonna be so upset. I promise you that. This is the one thing that they have as being the first caucus. And I'm pretty sure it's written in like the party founding document, or maybe even like the state constitution, like that they have to be the first caucus in the country, technically a caucus, right? So New Hampshire can have a primary election before them, but since that's not technically a caucus, it's fine if they're not first. But this is very important to them and their culture. And so it's gonna cause drama in the Democratic, party establishment in all of these states. I think we should have primaries on the same day all across the country. I think that makes the most sense. And it's kind of ridiculous that because a few folks in Iowa, which in demographic means are not representative of the country, get to decide, this is the front runner. And that really leads to people in other states voting for the candidate that won. People really like picking winners. And it's a problem that you can have people going and casting a ballot simply because they saw other people cast a ballot for that person, not because they're voting in their self-interest. And so that's bad for democracy. But Iowa really proved in 2020 that they don't really have the capacity to hold a good election. With the technology they relied on that was super unreliable, and just being in those caucus rooms, it's not a good way to pick the president.
Sure. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Look, when it comes to like Iowa and New Hampshire, I get it. If you had always been first, you'd want to stay first. You'd want to stay best. Look at a lot of white people and the way they talk about race. It's good to be first and they don't want to give it up. That said, you had it for a really long time. Maybe at some point sharing is caring. Maybe we could start to mix it up a little bit. Like, do you have to have it for 1,000 years? That said, I get what you're saying about doing it all in one day. And I do think there are some benefits to that. It does make me a little bit uncomfortable though, because, and it's not to say that there wouldn't be, a campaign for months that leads up to it, but I do kind of like the politicians having to respond to things, having to shift, having to ask, answer hard questions. It might still be possible. I certainly don't think it needs to be as dragged out and weird as it is right now. But anyway, I definitely think that in particular to generate some more, demographic, especially racial diversity in terms of the early votes. Like, come on, you got to mix it up. I think Nevada has a very good case to make in that area. I understand that they're not going to like it, and I worry that the Democratic Party is going to cave to it. But I think the time has probably come.
Yeah, I totally agree. Demographically, it makes sense that Nevada would go first, and there is a strength to staggering the parties or the primaries by state, because then the candidate actually has time to go and meet the people in the state. They get to know who they're voting for, and because there's a series of primaries, the candidates get much better at telling their story, communicating their message, which prepares them better for the general election. There are all sorts of reasons we could point to, but yeah, demographically, Nevada is much more representative of the rest of the country than Iowa is. And the other weird thing about primaries is that because Iowa is the first caucus, New Hampshire, usually the second primary, and then we go to Nevada, There's so much money that is spent in these states. The political industrial complex is very real. They spend so much money. It really invigorates the economy there for quite a few months. Like when I was in Iowa for Bernie, we went in July. The caucus wasn't until the first days of February or January. It's a long time ago, but yeah, we're there for months and months and months. And so they're gonna be upset also about what this is going to do to the local economy. They kind of rely on that money coming in.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, although the case would be that it could help the local economy of other states. Again, that's why I think it should be a rotating thing. I think, it's just fair. Like, I feel like this is tapping into what are supposed to be some values of our party, like that there's supposed to be a little bit of equality, like that you can mix it up. And anyway, anything to reduce a little bit of the Iowa specific cringe that comes from politicians, but on both sides of them all racing there, like pretending that they have really good reasons to be there 2 years before the election, and they're so happy to eat whatever food or whatever. I saw a post recently, it was from, I think, Tom Cotton, who's just weirdly hanging out in Iowa these days. And he was talking about how happy he was to eat it. I think it was this particular pizza place. And he was like, glad to be back in Iowa so I can have this pizza. And I think it was Parker Malloy who responded with, she mapped it out. There's one within 8 minutes of his DC office. There's one within like 7 minutes of his state office. There's one within like a certain number of minutes of his home. The last place he needed to go to get the pizza was Iowa. Like, but they're all so fake. It's so like the Carly Fiorina pretending she cares about their sports teams and everything. Like it's maximum political cringe. I'm done with it.
Yeah, it's super cringe. The one good thing about it is a lot of our food's grown in Iowa. There's a lot of hog lots. There's a lot of cornfields. It's good for people, I think, to see that side of the country, like what has to go into feeding people. But I think you're right that we do need to rotate it.
Exactly. Yeah. Look, and I wish that was more productive. I wish that sending our politicians to the sites of this massive industrial agriculture would lead to more reform of it, more of an understanding of the contributions to climate change and all that. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to work out that way in practice. And yes, I do think they should be visiting all sorts of different parts of the country. But I would say a lot of states would probably argue that Iowa isn't Nebraska. Iowa isn't Texas or Arkansas. Like, mix it up, everybody, come on. For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/The Damage Report. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.